Chapter 18. Island Mail. Found on page 115. The storm had wrecked many things, and everything was flooded. Our bridge had been broken, and our pipes were all burst. We had much to do. After days of work, I could see the boys were becoming bored. It was time for another adventure. Ernest decided to stay with his mother and me while the other boys got ready to go on a journey to the farm. They left with Storm and Grumble and the dogs, and I noticed that Jack had left with a cage full of pigeons, but I didn't really think much about it. The next morning, while my wife and Ernest and I sat on the porch, we talked about how the boys might be doing on the adventure. Ernest told us just to wait and that we would know the next day. But just then, a pigeon flew into the coop, and Ernest ran off. He came back with a small bit of paper in his hand. "It's a letter from the pigeon post office," he said. We laughed at the wonderful surprise. Ernest read the letter to us. "A hyena has killed a sheep and 2 lambs, but we have taken care of him. We are all fine. Love to all. Fritz." Every night after that we got a letter by the pigeon telling us of the boys' adventures. After their hyena fight, Fritz took the kayak from the beach and paddled up the river, and the boys on the shore caught a pair of black swans. While they were there, they also saw an amazing animal running out of the woods. By their description, I knew it was a tapir. Then they went back to the farm to collect all the cotton and rice they could. Next, they headed up to Prospect Hill. They found it again taken over by monkeys, who attacked them when they got there. After fighting off the monkeys, they spent a long and scary night alone. "We are afraid," wrote Fritz, "because we heard a noise during the night that was so loud all the animals ran from it. It was a roar like an elephant and a lion, and the dogs were very scared. There are giant footprints everywhere. Come to us, father. We are safe, but we are no match for this danger." After reading this last message by pigeon, I jumped up and ran to my donkey. I told Ernest to come after me the next morning with his mother and supplies. I rode through the night by morning and got to the boys in the morning, out of breath. The boys were thrilled to see me, and we went to inspect the footprints. I thought they were from an elephant, but the more I looked, the more I thought it must be from an entire herd of elephants. They were nowhere to be seen, however, and we all spent the night telling tales around the fire, too excited to sleep. The next morning, my wife and Ernest, along with the ostrich, got to camp and were happy to find us all safe. We decided to make a wall to keep out the elephants, and then the boys explored. Fritz went upriver in his kayak and found banana and cocoa plants to take home to farm. When we came back, he told us what he had seen. "I saw 15 to 20 elephants feeding by the river and bathing in the marsh, and I saw jaguars on the banks. As I was getting close to the elephants, the water started to bubble around the kayak. I thought I had paddled into the middle of a spring. Just then, a hippo came up right beside my canoe and scared the life out of me. I turned and came rushing back to you." It was a wonderful story, and it told us what kind of land was around us. Fritz handed his brother, Jack, a bag. Whatever was inside they kept a secret. Fritz begged me to be able to head back home by kayak, and I told him he could. He headed back, and Jack carried the bag on the back of Master Hurricane. When we got back to Rockbird, we put his bag into the swamp that night. We sat around and listened to Fritz's stories of his adventures on the kayak. Suddenly, we heard a loud and strange noise from the swamp. Jack jumped and ran at once at as the boys all sprang to their feet. I turned to see Fritz laughing and waited to see what was to come. Soon Jack came back with his wet bag. He opened it at our feet, and out plopped a giant pair of frogs. "This," said Jack, "is Grace, and this is Beauty." With that we laughed, and the frogs croaked away comically. It was a return worth remembering, and we all turned in early, tired and spent. The next day we all set back to work, starting in on a new project to put a flagpost and a gun at Shark Island, in case of danger. Our plan was to fly a red flag for danger if we spotted it so the others could be warned, and a white flag for calm. When the project was all finished, I let the boys celebrate by firing off the cannon with a loud shot that echoed around the island and had them laughing with joy. Chapter 19, Not Alone, found on page 121. Our lives went on like this, happily and busily. 10 years passed in much the same way as we watched our sons grow and change into men. We continued to take care of our land. We cleared the swamp and made a lake of it. We set swans there to rule the water. Our rabbits took over Shark Island, and our farm thrived. Fritz was now 24, strong and muscular and active. Ernest was 2 years younger and mild and calm. He liked to study and read. Jack, at 20, was fast and flexible like Fritz. Franz was 17 and was witty and funny. They were all good men and kind to their mother and loved each other. We still hoped that one day we would return to the company of other people. During our time in New Switzerland, the boys continued to have adventures, and they often went off on their own to explore. One time, Fritz went off in his kayak and returned late that night with a heavy sack. "I found many things in my travels, father," he said. "I even came upon a bed of giant oysters in shallow water. I dived for them and I pried them open to find these pearls." We all gathered to look around at his treasure. "Well," I told him, "they are beauties. They have no value for us here, but some day they may." Then Fritz took me aside. "Father," he said excitedly, "something else incredible has happened. I also found an albatross, and I had a rag wrapped around his leg. When I caught it and unwrapped the rag, there were English words written on it. It said, 'Save a poor Englishwoman from this smocking rock.'" "What did you do?" I asked, amazed. "I took a rag of my own and wrote, 'Do not worry, help is near.' I tied this round the bird's leg and set it off. But now I wonder if it will ever find her." "It could be that the note was quite old," I answered. "Don't tell the boys yet, as it may upset them. The writer could be long dead already." Fritz said that he felt the writer was alive and the smoke might be from a volcano. He wanted to find her, and so after much discussion I decided he could go. "First," I explained, "we will set off together, and then I will let you go on your own." Soon after, we set off with the boys, leaving behind only my wife and Franz, to see if I could set Fritz off on his own to find his fellow traveler. I allowed Fritz to put his kayak on board and boat, and we set sail. We traveled until we came to Pearl Bay, which Fritz had named after his precious find and where he found the note. We sat up on the beach with a camp and a fire. The younger boys went exploring on the coast. Soon Fritz and I heard shots coming from the shore. We both ran to see what was happening. Jack had been attacked and had fired at a wild boar that had knocked him down and hurt him. We tended to him, and soon he was asleep by the fire, healing. The next morning Fritz headed off to look about the boys, and I found Jack's boar dead. It was a giant with great tusks, which could have easily killed him. All at once a loud roar came from the jungle. Out from the trees came the biggest lion I have ever seen. It prowled back and forth, pacing and watching us, growling. We were too frightened to move, and had no weapons with us. As it grew more and more fierce, it suddenly ran forward at us. As it was in mid-air, a shot rang out. The lion fell to the ground, and Fritz came out of the shadow. He had saved us all from the beast. As we all gathered around the lion, a lioness suddenly came out of the jungle. After seeing her mate dead, she sprang at us too, and Fritz had to shoot her as well. We were all sad to see the lioness killed, but Fritz had saved us from sure death. I saw that he was now truly a man. With this trial behind us, we loaded once more onto our boat. After a time, Fritz got ready to go on his own in his little kayak to have his adventure. As Fritz got ready to set out, I told the boys that he was simply looking for new finds. He named the spot Farewell Point as we watched him go. We set off again in our boat, and Fritz went his own way, a man in search of his destiny. Only I knew his true purpose. When we returned to our home, my wife was worried to see Fritz gone. I told her that he would return shortly, and that he was simply exploring. Secretly, I had no idea when he would come back. We waited and worked, but after 5 days, I couldn't help worrying too. I decided we should all go out in a boat to see if we could find him. We sailed back toward the place where we had parted ways with Fritz when he set off in his kayak. As we came to Shark Island, we passed over a great whale that nearly took our poor boat down in as it surfaced beneath us. We settled ourselves again and sailed on until we suddenly saw a dark figure in a kayak pass us by. He stood up and watched us, then steered his boat behind a rock. All at once I thought that this person must have taken poor Fritz. I raised our white flag and called out to the figure, but he was too far to hear my cries. Jack took up the call because his voice was far louder than my own. "Look!" he shouted. "Come over here or we're going to come to get you!" With that, the kayak turned and started heading toward us. Suddenly, Ernest stood up and yelled, "Hello, Fritz!" he said loudly. "It's you!" Fritz answered with relief. "When I saw you, I didn't think you were my family. I thought you were pirates or natives, so I hid." We described our adventure with the whale, and he told us he had found another island where we could dock. "Follow me," he said. With that, he turned around and headed out in his kayak. I let the boy steer, and turned to tell my wife the truth about Fritz's mission. I told her about the note, and that he might have found somebody. She was filled with joy. But I could tell she was also worried. And so was I, about what we would find around the bend in the shore. As we landed on the shore of the island, Fritz disappeared ahead of us. All of us were left to wonder where he was. Suddenly he came out, holding a young woman by the hand. End of chapter 18.